Now we just gotta get ready for parking. Come on over.
All right, we'll call this meeting to order, the October 10th Planning Board for the Town of Apex. Please bow your heads for the invocation. Father God, we thank you for the opportunity to gather as a town to hear those who live here as well as those who are here on this planning board. Give us the wisdom and the discernment to make the decisions that are best for this town. And we ask this in your mighty name, Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Please stand for the flag and pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Diane, do we have any items of information this evening?
Yes, we do. I wanted to let you know that congratulations are in order. Tina Sherman's been named our new vice chair. And we do have two new planning board members who will be with you at your November meeting, Daniel Cotter-Parast and Alyssa Stepuson. Alyssa has a real estate background and economic development background in Chatham County and Fuquay-Varina. She's in the private sector now. And Daniel is a software engineer with Oracle, and he lives in the Justice Heights neighborhood. So we will get them up to speed and oriented for the November meeting, and we'll have a longer bio to read when they're actually here with us.
Awesome, thank you. And congratulations to Ms. Sherman.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. Public comment. Is it time for the public to speak on items that do not appear in the agenda on the public hearings? Any member of the public wishing to comment on public hearing items will be called at the appropriate time later in the agenda. If you've not done so already, please sign in for the particular item that you're interested in, my right, your left, for the public comment section. That is the period of time for the opportunity for the public to express concerns or opinions, but it's not intended to be a question and answer session. During public comment, the public may comment on any non-public hearing item included, new business, that does not appear in this agenda. Excuse me, that does appear in this agenda. Comments from the public on the new business items will not be taken later in the agenda, so if you wish to speak on new business items, public comment is the time to do so. All comments must be limited to 3 minutes. When the 3 minutes is up, I will ask that you wrap up your comments. If there is a large number of you on a particular item, I will ask that you have a representative be selected to speak for the entire group and limit the comments to 9 minutes. If not, comments on a single topic should not be repeated. Thank you. On to item number 1, minutes from the September 12th, 2022 meeting. I take it all of you have already reviewed them. Are there any comments or possible motion?
Make a motion to approve.
All right, Keith has a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, Tim second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposing? All right, passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, next we're going to hear from Jenna Schaus on item number 1, public hearing and possible motion regarding the amendments to the bicycle and pedestrian systems map.
Hi, good afternoon. So today I'll be presenting for item number 1, a public hearing and possible motion regarding amendments to the bicycle and pedestrian system plan map. So for these amendments, we're looking in the vicinity of Richardson Road, specifically the segment between Hume Olive Road and US 1, including a short segment where there's existing Richardson Road, and then most of the segment is future Richardson Road. So the first of the 2 amendments is to change the proposed facility type from street side greenway to proposed side path along the west side of Richardson Road. And there are 3 reasons we're proposing this change. The first is the 2045 land use map. It's because it designates development along this segment of Richardson Road as medium density residential, so more of a suburban nature development along here, and street side greenways are typically provided when there's a rural context. So a side path is more suitable for that type of development. The second is the Richardson Road conservation easement, which is shown right here, where there are development restrictions. In order to install a street side greenway, there's a minimum 20-foot, a 20-foot easement is needed at minimum, and then that facility is constructed outside of the right-of-way. So we'd be limited and wouldn't be able to provide it through that easement, through the conservation easement. And then finally, the Friendship Station development, which is up here in the Richardson Road, Hume Olive vicinity, was approved prior to the street side greenway designation, and street side greenway cannot be accommodated along that frontage of Richardson Road. So then moving to the other amendment, it's another facility change. The proposal is to change public greenway to proposed side path along a future street, and that's shown right here on the east side of Richardson Road. And the purpose of this change is to align with a potential rezoning, the Towns at the Station, where the side path would be provided along a residential street within that subdivision, and then it would connect to a proposed future greenway shown on here on the existing map that continues on to the Apex Friendship Schools campus. And Planning and Community Development Department staff, as well as Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources staff, recommend approval of these amendments. And at their September 28th meeting, the Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources Advisory Commission unanimously recommended approval. So I'm here to answer any questions that you may have about these amendments.
You know, I do have one question.
Yes.
Existing side path right now on Richardson is on the eastern side of the road, correct?
That's correct.
So we're gonna have people moving over to the west, or we're gonna have a totally new side path?
The plan is to have both. So we'll keep the existing, which is shown here in solid purple, and then the plan is to have side path on both sides, rather than the existing plan shows side path on the east side and street side greenway on the west.
Okay. And that'll go for the full extension of Richardson.
That's correct, or at least on the east side. On the west side, it's just from Hume Olive to US 1, but from the east side, it continues on north.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions for Jenna? Possible motion.
I make
I'll,
a motion to approve.
I'll second.
All right, I have a motion from Keith and a second from Tina. Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposing? All right, passes unanimously. On item number 2, Shelley is going to talk to us about a possible motion regarding rezoning case 22CZ07, the Chapel Ridge Apartments PUD.
Good afternoon, y'all.
Good afternoon.
So this might look familiar to you, just giving you a warning. This is the Chapel Ridge North PUD rezoning. As you can see, this project's been before you heard it in July. Since then, there have been some changes which are requiring the project to go back through the full planning board and town council process. The two biggest changes are the addition of the Bishop property, which was formerly kind of a hole in the project, and a change to the Sherry property to permit the single-family home to stay. Project, just as a super quick overview, is located east of 540 and south of 64, just south of the Beaver Creek Shopping Center, and west of the townhomes for Hempstead. Just to the west of the project is the future Jordan Lutheran Church property. As you can see, the parcels are mostly wooded with a few streams and some cleared areas. They're large lot, single family. They range from about 1.7 to 2.5 acres. They're currently zoned rural residential. If the rezoning is, as proposed, is approved, it'll be planned unit development conditional zoning. Currently, the 2045 land use map designates this as medium density residential. If the rezoning is approved, that designation will change to high density residential. This is our context area map. The blue area here is mostly Beaver Creek crossings with a little bit of residential in the general area. This is one of our transit-oriented development areas, and this project is right here in the brown, just outside of it. Typically speaking, transit-oriented development dictates higher densities in order to support denser development, or in order to support the transit, excuse me. And in 2021, staff proposed a land use map amendment to designate this as a higher density area. At the time, planning board recommended approval, went to town council. Town council said, let's think about this a little bit more, sent it back to planning committee of the town council. And they said, why don't we shelve this and we'll take a look at changing the land use map when we have rezonings that are before us, so we can determine whether or not to do it based on the merits of each specific case. So that's where we are now. As you can see, there was formerly kind of a spot right here that was not filled. That's the Bishop property that has been added. To give you an overview of the changes that have been made since you saw it in July, as I said, the Bishop property was added. The Sherry property was changed mostly to single-family residential here. Both of those were because of requests from the adjacent neighbors. It makes total sense to close the hole where the Bishop property was. Nobody wanted to force Mr. Bishop to stick it out next to taller apartments and be kind of the only spot right there. The applicant was able to work with him to clear that up. And then the Sherry property, the residents asked that that be left single family so that in the future, if they decide to redevelop, they can redevelop a little more contiguously. The developer did decide to keep a portion of the stream buffer here as RCA. The lot will still be over 1 acre though, and that's just to kind of preserve that existing stream buffer area so that there's no concern about future damage to it or anything. Some of the conditions that go along with that are that there will be no buffer between the single-family parcels. So in this area, the Sherry property will not be required to have a buffer built between the two lots. Otherwise, the UDO would require that at this point. And a 6-foot-tall fence will be provided along the southern-facing property lines adjacent to these parcels. In addition, the developer is agreeing to a condition that says that no dumpster shall be located within 50 feet of the northern property line of either this parcel here or the Corey property just across the street. And any buildings located on Area C, so the smaller piece on the southeastern side of the Ackerman Hill Chapel Ridge intersection, will be limited to a maximum of 3 stories tall. That was to try to help push some of that height a little bit further and make it a little bit more of a gradual adjustment through the neighborhood. The developer has also worked with the adjacent church site and agreed to provide at least 1 sewer stub and 1 water stub to the eastern property of that site in a location to be determined at site plan. And they will also work with Jordan Lutheran Church to drain the existing pond on the southern property line. So Jordan Lutheran Pond's southern property line, so right here, concurrently with the development and construction of this project. And that's just because both the church and the apartment complex have concerns about possible liability issues arising from having children near the pond and that kind of thing. And then because the development now has frontage on both sides of Ackerman Hill Drive, they will actually be installing 5-foot sidewalks on both sides of the street there. What these changes required was a second neighborhood meeting as well, and that was held on August 22nd, and that report is attached to your staff report. Everything else has remained the same. I'm happy to answer any questions or go back over any of those items if you'd like. If you have any questions, the applicant is also here as well.
Shelley, can you remind me where the church is?
Yes, ma'am. The church is in this parcel right here up against Beaver Creek
That's what I thought. Thank you.
Crossings. You're welcome.
Shelley, who's gonna maintain the 6-foot fence?
My understanding is it would be the apartment complex would be maintaining that. But we can get complete. Okay, yes, I have received the nod.
Any questions for Shelley? Did the applicant want to speak?
Good evening, Chair Skinner and members of the Planning Board. Matthew Carpenter with Parker Poe, 301 Fayetteville Street, here on behalf of the developer, High Street Residential. Also with me this evening are Josh Dix with High Street, the developer, Cody Trowbridge with McAdams, our civil engineer, and then Kevin Dean with Kimley Horn, our traffic engineer. Thanks to Shelley for her overview. As you can see here, and you probably remember, hasn't been that long, this case was before you on July 11th, and at that meeting you voted 4-2 to recommend approval to Town Council. And then following that July 11th meeting, we were at Town Council on the 26th, and after what was a lengthy hearing, Council decided to continue the case to give us more time to address really 3 specific issues. The first being the Bishop property, which Shelley described as kind of the whole of the project. It is in the center of the project, but it wasn't part of the case in July. And then also the Sherry property, which kind of sticks out of the bottom of the assemblage at the southern end of the site. And then also a general desire for more communication and dialogue with the Chapel Ridge neighbors. And so following those July meetings, we held a meeting that wasn't an official neighborhood meeting, but it was a meeting with the Chapel Ridge folks on August 10th. And then we noticed a formal neighborhood meeting that was held on the 22nd. And so we took feedback we received at those 2 meetings and also the feedback from council, and we revised our case and resubmitted on September 1st. And so we're happy to be before you tonight to share that we really think we've addressed all 3 of these issues in a way that results in a much more cohesive plan and well thought out development. And so I'll start by just going through those changes visually here, and then I'll kind of refresh your recollection on some of the parts of the case that haven't changed that we believe are still significant public benefits. So you'll see in blue here the cross-hatched parcel, that's the Bishop property. And the developer worked for really over 6 months with Mr. Bishop to reach an agreement to bring that property into the PUD. And obviously you can see just visually it makes it for a much more cohesive site and allows us to kind of spread units and density around and push density north in the plan as much as we can. And then you'll also see in pink at the bottom of the screen is the Sherry property that Shelley mentioned. And what we were able to do there is to place a condition in the PUD text that property is only permitted for single-family detached. And so the pink area is right at an acre, and it'll only ever be under this rezoning request, single-family detached. And so the goal is to keep the existing home that's there, and that property could potentially be subdivided in the future to be its own lot. And then the other 2 changes called out on this slide were in direct response to our conversations with neighbors in August. You can see in red, we've limited height in the area outlined in red to 3 stories. And so that allows more of a density transition, or height transition, south. And then finally, we've agreed to construct the 6-foot fence that Shelley mentioned along the shared property line shown in yellow. And so those are the major changes. While I'm on the plan, I'll call out some of the other parts of the project that existed in July and still exist. And that's the extension of Chapel Ridge Road north, which will be from the existing cul-de-sac here north to connect to Beaver Creek Commons Drive. and that's over 800 linear feet of road construction at a total cost around $2 million. And so we think that's a really important connection here to help traffic movement in this area. And then along that same road, you can see in yellow, we'll be constructing a 10-foot side path, and then in red, 5-foot sidewalk. And as Shelley mentioned, another benefit of bringing the Bishop property in is we can now construct sidewalks on both sides of Ackerman Hill Drive. And so there will now be sidewalks on the north and south side. And then the RCA areas are colored in green on this plan, and the buffers. And so you can see those on the western portion of the site and to the north of the Cherry property. And then this slide just shows the two plans side by side, because I think it's a good illustration of our changes. You know, you can see just glancing at it that it just looks better. It's a much better plan, and we think from a planning perspective, it'll really help achieve a really great project. And then, you know, a big part of our time in August was spent talking with the neighbors and trying to find out if there were specific concerns we could address through PUD conditions. And so this, on the left, is the concern we heard, and then on the right is the change to the rezoning request that we made in response. And so I won't go through every single one, but you know, there's the dumpster condition. We've committed to buffers around the site. And then at the bottom, in red, are the new conditions we've added that I just mentioned in response to those specific concerns that we heard at the two meetings in August. And so we're proud of where we are here, even though we understand that everybody isn't happy about the project. We've at least been able to add some mitigating conditions that we hope will help. And then a really big part of the benefits here is the affordable housing commitment. And that condition is to about 13 affordable housing units at 60% AMI for a period of 10 years. And all those units will be leased and managed by the developer. And a big benefit there is that Trammell Crow and High Street Residential have a lot of experience managing those units and leasing them. And so we hope that will take some of the burden off the town and off CJ Valenzuela. And so at the bottom, you can see the 60% AMI income limits. I think that's helpful to provide some context. So for a household of one, it's $44,940, and then it scales up based on household size. And I thought it was interesting. The new numbers came out in April, and these numbers went up almost $14,000. And so, you know, it just underscores that the housing crisis in Wake County and specifically in Apex is still going on. And then here are some architectural examples. We do have conditions in the PUD text that commit to specific design standards. Although the buildings haven't been designed, we wanted to give you an idea of what they could look like. And just to state that Trammell Crow typically tries to design their projects around based on the existing context of the area. You know, it's not this is how we build apartments, we're putting them here. It's really a site-specific design. And then, you know, to conclude, I kind of wanted to put everything on one page here. And as Shelley mentioned, when the land use map changes were being considered in 2021, the site was shown as high-density residential, which was actually approved by the planning board. And then council decided to keep it at medium-density residential, the idea being that cases could come in individually and an analysis could be made of, does this particular case have the benefits that justify it'll include the extension of Chapel Ridge Road at around $2 million in total cost, the construction of a bus stop on Chapel Ridge Road, which will really help with future transit connectivity as that area of the town grows, 5% EV charging spaces. We've agreed to 11 of the 13 recommended EAB conditions, one of which is green infrastructure certificate or green building certification, which is one I haven't seen a ton in Apex. We'll have architectural standards to ensure the development is high quality. The Parks and Rec fee is around $823,000. The 10-foot side path and sidewalks that really will promote pedestrian mobility in this area. And then as I went through earlier, the mitigating conditions that we outlined that will help kind of try to offset some of the negative effects, potentially negative effects of our project. And then, so in total, we feel that we've met the spirit of what council envisioned with the land use map decision. This is a case with significant public benefits that will be of great benefit to the town, and we respectfully ask for your approval. Thank you.
Any questions for Matthew?
Mr. Matthew, I have a question. You mentioned the Area C building height limitation will be 3 stories. Can you please speak about the other sides?
I can, yep. So the overall height limit is 5 stories, and then we have a condition, and the only reason it's 5 stories is there's a small area facing the northern property line here near the church that changes in grade significantly. And so that's the only place we really think it could be 5 stories because of the slope. And we have another condition that limits buildings facing existing single-family homes to 4 stories. So there's the 4-story limit, and then in this area specifically, the red area, there's the 3-story limit now. And so part of what helped us do that was the addition of the Bishop property, which allowed us to put some of the units on that parcel that weren't there before. So.
Can I ask, is there a change in total number of units now that the Bishop property was acquired?
No, units are staying at 370, which is what it was before. We did go to 371 just to account for the house that's on the Sherry property, which wasn't part of the case before. So no change in apartment units at all.
So will that pink area, the Sherry property, will that just remain as is, untouched?
Yes.
And then I have one last question. Are there any bicycle lanes proposed?
I don't know of specific bicycle lanes. The multi-use path on the east side of Chapel Ridge will be 10 feet wide, and so I think it can be used for bicycling and pedestrian. I don't know if Cody has any other thoughts about that.
Sorry, that is the intent of the side
Yep.
path, is for it to accommodate both bicycles and pedestrians.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shelley.
Matthew, I want to go back to the EV parking. So there's 5 parking spaces total for?
No,
all the
5%.
5%?
Yep.
Okay. So are they clustered in certain areas, or they're all going to be in one particular section, like a charging bank, like you would see the Teslas do? or-
There's nothing in the text that requires them in any specific space. So I think they'll be dispersed. I don't know if Josh Dix has any other comments on that.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yep.
Yeah, they'll be dispersed throughout the development just to allow different residents to access those charging stations as readily as they can.
So pretty much one per building, or a cluster of them per building is the idea?
Would be 5% of the overall requirement, which I think is it could be around 400 or 500 spaces, I believe. And so 5% of that spread across the site among the 3 different buildings, or however many buildings there are. We haven't, finalized the actual building layout, but we know there will be more than one.
Okay. And those are privately maintained?
Yes, by the owner of the apartments. Right.
Thank you.
So the parking calculation is going to be between 1.3 and 1.8 spaces per unit, depending, as a minimum, and 370 units. So you're looking at close to 500 minimum required parking spaces, and 5% of that will give us about 25 to 30 EV parking spaces split up amongst the 3 buildings. So you're looking at anywhere from 7 or 8 to 10 spaces per building.
It's almost as many as the handicap spots.
Yes, sir.
Considerable.
That-
One last question, super last one. Was there any updates from Wake County Public School?
There have not been, no. The letter that we received for the March filing, since the unit count remained the exact same, there were no changes needed to that letter, which said that there's currently not capacity for elementary and high school, but that new development of schools over the next several years may address capacity.
questions for the applicant?
Question for you. The 5-story section, you said there's a grade drop off there.
Right.
And so are you trying to have a max height, but basically where your 3, 4, and 5, all AGL is about the same?
That's
Or
the
are you
goal.
planning on elevating the site and going 5 stories?
I believe the goal is the former, to keep them all at similar elevations, and then the extra story could come at the ground level where it slopes down. Is that accurate, Cody?
That's great. It's more of like a basement on the lower side of the building, so it's 5 stories if you're facing from one direction, but from the single-family homes, you'd only
It's
see
here.
4 stories up above the ground.
Okay.
Can you elaborate on what that basement will look like?
Parking's out in front of your
Is
4
that-
stories, so
yes.
you'd have to travel through your 4th story section and then go down. Is that what you're saying? So the parking is not gonna be accessible to the 5th,
It will be a walkout.
quote-unquote basement level. So it'll be walk out to the fire lane is what you're looking at. There's no parking back behind it, is that correct?
We're still working on the site layout. We don't have any kind of final parking schemes solved yet, but the intent is for people on that walkout basement level to be able to walk through a gradual slope back around the building to the upper level.
So that's actually very similar to what we see at the Villages of Apex up here. The apartments that are up at 64, they actually are, the shortest wall that you see is what you see at 64, and then it slopes back to a stream bank at the back. And then they have what we tend to consider as basement apartments, but they still have windows. It's just that you walk out what is your front door towards the stream, and then there's a sidewalk that meets ADA requirements and wraps back around the building so that you can access your parking. So it is slightly further away from the parking generally. On the other hand, you get a much prettier view when you're staring out your front windows. So it's a trade-off. But that's what they've been demonstrating to us consistently. This section right through here, if you can see my mouse, is a much higher grade than when we get back here. This is a riparian buffer. And this, if anybody's ever driven out through there on Beaver Creek Road, off on the left, it actually drops off significantly on both sides because they had to build the road up in order to get it across 540. So there's a fairly significant drop off through there. But that's the reason why the pond still exists out here and why these little lines that you can see, those are actually riparian buffer lines. There's actually a stream that runs right through here and it's kind of ditched in a section. If that makes sense.
So there's not gonna be a staggered roof line between the 3 and the 4 in that same building? I mean, a 4 and a 5.
That's not the intent. I don't know, yeah. Yeah, come up, Josh.
Josh Dix, High Street Residential Trammell Crow Company. Thanks for having us. No, the intent is truly 4-story buildings. There's no intent to do 5-story buildings. It was just one of those unfortunate things where the grade is dropping off, and so when we build the 4 stories up on one side of the block, then we just have, it would either be on stilts or it would be on a basement wall or something like that. And so you might as well put units on the downslope side, just like in a walkout basement scenario. So it is truly meant to be 4 stories. And if it was a flat site, it would be 4 stories. But because in that one section it's sloping off, we either have to build the building up on stilts or we put something underneath of it. And obviously it makes more sense to put something underneath of it. So it would be 5 stories in that one zone on the downslope side, if that makes sense.
And those units could be facing the natural area too, so it's
Correct.
even more reason to put them there.
Well, and the reason why I asked that is because we've seen some projects where, the natural grade is lower and everybody has this, well, if this were built in this area, well, then we raise the elevation of the site and then you put it on top and it just towers over.
Right, no. The
It
intent
winds
is
up
that
not being the intent of what was,
we're trying to work with the existing grade
okay,
and just keep working downhill with the existing grade.
okay.
That's the plan. I'm sorry, I think you had it.
So downhill would be at the border of the church, right?
Yeah, the slope, if I could with the mouse, the slope is generally speaking heading this way and this way and this way. So if you see this RCA area here in green that I'm highlighting with the mouse, the stream is running down this way, so basically west, and then this is obviously running this direction. So the slope of the hill is heading in the direction from right to left on your map. And then a little bit to the north too, at the same time. Sorry to jump in. I
No,
just
no,
figured
you're
that-
good. That was a good answer.
Any additional questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
This will open up the public hearing portion. Do we have any comments in the audience?
Sorry, I just recalled something that I forgot to mention earlier. There was a transportation plan amendment that was associated with this when it came before you. There were no changes, excuse me. There were no changes to that, and since you all had already recommended approval of it, it did not need to come back to this board. It will, however, be heard with,
Bless you.
just got a frog in my throat, and it's tickling. It will be heard with the town council presentation and will be decided at that point. I didn't want anyone to feel like they were missing something or that we were trying to hide anything. I just wanted to make sure that I mentioned that.
Shelley, I know we got some emails, and do we need to discuss those, or are they just?
Thank you. I appreciate that, sir. We did receive a few emails today. Unfortunately, they were after the cutoff date. These are the only two emails that we received prior to the cutoff day. One is from Ms. Boykin and one is from the applicant. You are welcome. I'm just going to pull us back to the layout.
Did we have anyone sign in to speak on this item? Thank you.
And I'll add, Chair, that the folks under my name are here just in, they just spoke and are here for questions. So
All right.
no need to call.
All right, so, Ms. Boykin, do you?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm always amazed that they get all the time they want and we get 3 minutes per person, but that's what it is. My name is Rita Boykin, and Ray and I live at 1500 Clark Farm Road in Apex. My neighbors and I have been coming before you and the town of Apex since 2007. That's 25 years. Not 25, 15, sorry. Didn't proofread that. With concerns about our neighborhood, Chapel Ridge. I am tired, I am frustrated, I am disappointed. I feel like I'm beating a dead horse, but I will not just roll over and give up fighting for what I believe to be in the best interest of my neighborhood, my neighbors, and Ray and I. Apex is in the process of devastating my neighborhood, and I cannot and will not just stand by and watch it happen. What is so special anyway about this proposed project that warrants Apex changing its 2045 land use map? Why even have a land use map if you're not going to adhere to it? This is a poorly designed layout. They aren't even sure what it's going to look like. 370 high-density units, 481 parking spaces, which is what we were told. And now I'm hearing it's anywhere from 1.3 to 1.7, and I thought I was hearing 500 or more parking spaces. That's something you need to ask them about. 481 is not enough. It should be 1.7 parking space per unit. But because it's a PUD, the developer's plan is now 1.3, which is what we were told. This is what happens when a developer requests a PUD designation. Changes are allowed to be made to standards previously designated by the town of Apex. And in truth, from what I'm hearing, you still don't know what that finished product is going to look like because they're not sure what that finished product is going to look like. The developer wants to build 370 high-density apartments on land designed medium density. They are not coming before you to request rezoning to high density. Instead, they are proposing a PUD designation, which allows them to build high density without requesting that specific rezoning. The homeowners have banded together to sell their properties to a developer that have never been denied the opportunity to sell. They each could have sold individually. That was their choice, one that they set into motion with consequences which those of us who remain living in Chapel Ridge will have to live with. They're leaving, no longer their problem. They don't have to look at 3, 4, 5-story apartment buildings. If this PUD proposal is not approved, they can still sell their property. You do not need to approve this proposal because it does not even check the box of being medium density project. Approving this project will prevent future development of this area that would have a better vision. I've said and written all of this before to no avail, but I do it again in hopes that you will realize that this project is not right for this area. It's not. We are strongly opposed to this project, which will further change and devastate our neighborhood, and are in hopes that you will not approve this proposal. However, if you do, please do not add insult to injury and tell us again like you did in July that you feel our pain. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Boyd. Michael Merker.
Now, good evening. Michael Merker with Jordan Lutheran Church. We're at 1201 Chapel Ridge Road. Badavane Hanrath is yielding his time to me. I don't think I'll need the whole time, but he's the one that follows. Members of the Planning Board, thank you for the time to reconsider the rezoning request for Chapel Ridge North PUD. I do serve as the pastor at Jordan Lutheran Church, which owns 6.2 acres at 1201 Chapel Ridge Road, and the congregation will have its northern, its western, and southern property lines enveloped by the rezoning proposal before you. Over the past several months, we have been engaged in a dialogue with the developer as they have held meetings with neighboring properties. Our congregation has witnessed how the developer has listened to specific requests from adjoining properties. They have amended their rezoning request while incorporating amendments into their official rezoning request to the town of Apex. Following the July Town Council meeting held to consider a previous rezoning request that came before you as well as the council, the developer did hold meetings on August 22nd, and I was there present to witness the fruits of some of those conversations. The developer was present along with neighbors of Chapel Ridge. The townhomes at Hempstead were also represented by several residents, as well as Jordan Lutheran Church, all who bordered the rezoning request. While many have mentioned this evening, not everyone in the room wanted the project to proceed. The developer was listening, adjusting buffers and revising building heights to respond to specific requests from concerned property owners. The rezoning request before you today addresses connectivity issues, which I have come to realize are very important to you, the planning board, and also to the town council about those things that will change the shape and landscape of the town of Apex. Jordan Lutheran Church speaks in favor of the rezoning request and looks forward to working with and caring for the new neighbors who will move into Apex. We will share the 5-story neighbor wall. And many of those apartment owners, they will look at Jordan Lutheran Church. So we are excited that they will look at us. But we are excited to get to meet them. We speak in favor of the rezoning appeal.
Thank you, sir. And I believe it is Borden BP Hornath. Is that right?
He yielded his time to me.
Okay, thank you. Any other folks in the audience? If not, I'll close the public hearing section and bring it back to the board for discussion and a possible motion.
Well, I will start with being that July meeting was a very tough meeting, and I appreciate Mr. Matthew the direct feedback that I gave that was taken, and the conversations that were had. I hope that that is the way that you and other folks representing developers will approach projects. I think that is absolutely the best way to, for projects to proceed in the community, to have conversations. Unfortunately for me, this, as I raised in July, comes back to a town error. We as a town made a huge mistake, and I understand why this was made. I understand for all the political reasons that this was made, but we made a huge mistake in leaving this very up in the open about the correct project coming before. The 2045 land use map says medium density, and if this project were a medium density project, I would gladly vote in favor of it. Given, again, all of the conditions, all of the conversations that have had, especially given that. But unfortunately, this just falls that short of the mark for me. I mean, we've addressed some of the concerns I have around the schools a little bit. We know the schools aren't quite there, but we know that within 5 years it is potential that won't be an issue. We have affordable housing units, but we as a town missed the mark in rezoning this as high-density residential. Given that where the land use map is, I think is a problem. So I will be voting against this as I did in July.
Motion?
I'm not,
Okay.
just wanted to.
All right.
Well, I will add that the land use map is fluid, and when you print it out, it actually says that. And it has, and it's fluid for a reason, to give us flexibility. So it's not in concrete, but this area, as far as affordable housing, how many one-bedroom apartments were there?
We haven't decided on the final unit count, but I think it was about half one bedroom that we submitted with the school's map, and then a mix of 2 and 3, the other 50%.
So the affordable housing issue is one great thing. I know the one-bedrooms don't really fall up under the affordable housing thing, but in a way it is. We don't have one bedroom, so in a way, it's added a little bit more of the affordable housing plan.
So are you making a motion of some sort?
No, I was just
Okay.
speaking.
All right.
And the bus, are they still proposing the bus go by the neighborhood?
Yes, sir.
Any motions? Any other comments?
I have to agree with Tina. The same reasons why from our previous July's meeting, and also the fact that even though this project has now been revised and updated to include the parcels, really listen to the residents and try to work things out. Seems to me it's forced from moving into rural to high density scale. I think if it remained medium density, I would move forward with that.
So conversely, if we're going from a retail space to rural residential, there is no buffer, correct? Would this not be that?
And I unfortunately would argue while the 2045 land use map while the land use maps are absolutely fluid, we just did recently adopt it, and it should have, for that exact reason, it should have went ahead and been adopted to high density resolution, high density, if that's, I mean, for all of the reasons why these parcels should be high density, that is what it should have been adopted to at the 2045 land use map adoption. Because that did not occur, that is sort of where I sit. So I agree, this could absolutely be a buffer, but yeah, given the fluidity and the proximity to when we just approved the land use map, I'm not there.
So how do we move forward? Do we have a motion one way or another?
I'll make a motion to approve, unless we have more discussion.
I'll second it.
So Keith, you're making a motion to approve,
Yes.
and Steve, you're making a second. All right. I think I already know we have some dissenting votes, but all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposing?
No.
So 2 dissents,
No, I've said no as well.
3 dissents?
Chairman, I was a no vote due to conflict of interest.
All right. So that's 4. So it sounds like this does not pass.
Are you a no vote?
Yeah, I can't vote on this.
Oh, you can't, abstaining vote.
Sorry, I said no vote. I'm an abstaining vote.
Sorry.
Sorry about that.
So are you requesting that to be recused? Because that, we needed to have that discussion earlier in the meeting.
Yeah, I guess I would, sorry, I should have done that. We went through this in email, I'm sorry.
So I'm not really sure. I'm not an attorney. I'm not sure if you need to, it might be that you need to reconsider the vote, go back and recuse Ryan from the vote and then re-vote. Otherwise, he will be listed as a yes because he hasn't been recused by the group, I believe. So whoever made the motion can ask for reconsideration.
I'll ask for reconsideration.
All right, so Keith is asking for reconsideration on this vote.
And I think you all have to second it and vote on that.
All right.
Does Ryan
I'll
have to
second.
officially ask for, to be recused?
You need to rescind the vote. We gotta start all over.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
So
Keith is making a motion to rescind and Tina is seconding. All right, so then we need to make a motion to recuse.
now you need to vote to rescind your earlier vote.
Okay, so all in favor of rescinding the prior vote, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposing? All right, so that's unanimously passed.
And I'll make a motion to recuse Ryan.
All right, Tina's making a motion to recuse Ryan. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Tim will second. All right. All in favor of recusing Ryan? Aye.
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 Any opposing? All right, so that's unanimous.
And then
Okay.
Chair,
Now-
I don't know if you would like to address that even with a recusal, the person can participate, they just cannot participate in the vote.
Right, thank you. So for this particular item, Mr. Akers can discuss, but he cannot vote. So that's why you just saw us go through these motions here. So now we will actually go through and make a third motion now, which will actually be either for or against this motion. So Keith, does your original motion still stand?
Yes. Yep, I'll make a motion to approve.
All right, and Steve, you also seconding? All right. So all in favor of this motion, say aye. Aye. And we have any opposing?
Nay.
Yes.
So 3 noes, correct?
No.
Mm-hmm.
Tim, Tina, Sarah? All right.
Yes.
So 1, 2, 3. So there's 3 yeses and 3 noes.
Motion fails.
So the motion fails.
Basically, it's gonna go to the council without a recommendation.
All right.
Council decide.
Does there need to be any sort of,
So we need to fill out our forms for the noes, is that right?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
that's the best thing to do.
So Tina, Sarah, Tim, I'll ask you guys to complete your dissenting votes for this one.
Can
And
we add
this-
it all on one instead of have 3 separate forms? You've already got one, Tina, right,
yes,
drafted?
I do.
So we can just sign on for Sarah and I?
You don't have access to the form she's filling out, because it's on her computer individually.
All right, so the rezoning of case 22CZ07 fails.
It'd be easy if I just write it out. Like, well, it's fine, I've got it. Let's see here. Let's see.
Moving then on to item number 3. Lauren is going to talk to us about potential rezoning case 22CZ09, the Utley Farms PUD.
Would you like me to wait a moment while people exit? Or I can continue, whatever you'd like. It's great timing for the train, too.
All right, Lauren, so you're gonna talk to us about rezoning case, or possible rezoning case 22CZ09, the Utley Farms PUD.
Yes, sir. This is rezoning case 22CZ09 Utley Farms PUD, located at 3720 Old US 1 Highway and 0 New Hill Olive Chapel Road. These properties are located in this general area in Wake County. The properties are north of Old US 1 Highway and west of New Hill Olive Chapel Road. The properties are south of Bellaterra subdivision and east of Jordan Point subdivision. The properties are currently zoned Wake County Residential 40W with a small portion zoned Wake County Residential 80W. The adjacent zonings are to the north, Planned Unit Development Conditional Zoning, to the east, Wake County Residential 40W and Mixed Office Residential Retail Conditional Zoning, and to the south, Wake County Residential 40W, and to the west, Planned Unit Development Conditional Zoning with a small portion of Wake County Residential 40W. The applicant is proposing to rezone the properties to Planned Unit Development Conditional Zoning. The 2045 land use map designates the properties as low-density residential and low-density residential office employment. The proposed rezoning to Planned Unit Development Conditional Zoning is consistent with the land use map designations. To give you a little bit of a heads up, the north is going this way, so this is the north on this side. The site consists of 2 parcels, approximately 56.59 acres. The northern property is vacant with existing vegetation and a stream that bisects the property from north to south. And the southern property contains existing historic structures and residential structures and a stream that bisects the property from north to south with existing vegetation. The applicant conducted a neighborhood meeting on April 27th. The neighborhood meeting report is in your packet. A full list of the proposed uses is on page 2 of the staff report. The proposed residential uses include single-family, accessory apartment, and other uses associated to residential subdivisions. The applicant is proposing a maximum number of 113 units with a maximum density of 2 units per acre. The proposed minimum lot width is 50 feet, and the minimum lot width size is 6,000 square feet. A full list of the proposed residential setbacks is on page 2 of the staff report, and a full list of the zoning conditions can be found on page 3 of the staff report. A few I'd like to point out. The first one is no covenant shall be placed on the property which prohibits accessory apartment as a use. And number 12 is the affordable housing condition. To kind of summarize it, is the applicant has offered an affordable housing condition that requires a minimum of 2 single-family homes to median income families earning 100% of the AMI with a minimum affordability period of 20 years. As I mentioned, this is to the north, so this is the north right here. The buffers include a 10-foot type B along the north adjacent to Bellaterra, a 10-foot type B, and a 20-foot type B along the northern boundary. Along Jordan Point and Country Acres Lane is a 10-foot type B, and a 10-foot type B along the east buffer. Along Old US 1 Highway and New Hill Olive Chapel Road is a 30-foot type B. The hatch represents future development. So within the future development area, the buffers along this location can be removed in those locations if the properties are redeveloped in conjunction with the Martin, Miller, and/or Vitek properties that are located south and east of the future development areas. So I wanted to point that out as well. As well as in this location, there's a red asterisk that represents the historic house and 2 outbuildings that the applicant worked with CAP to preserve. So you'll see that this right here is the house. The RCA shall meet the requirements in the UDO. This development is exempt from initially providing RCA since the proposed low-density single-family development has a maximum of 2 units per acre. However, if any mass grading is proposed in the single-family sections, the development will need to provide an additional 5% of the RCA. A full list of the architectural conditions can be found on page 5 of the staff report. The residential conditions are what we generally see for a single family. The maximum building height proposed for residential is 36 feet, no more than 2 stories. A traffic impact analysis has been performed as part of this PUD. I'll summarize a few of the road improvements. However, the full TI requirements can be found on page 6 of the staff report, as well as Mr. Russell Dalton is here to provide clarification and to discuss the proposed road improvements. All proposed driveway access and improvements on state-maintained roadways are subject to NCDOT review and approval. Road improvements are subject to modification and final approval by the Town of Apex and NCDOT as part of the master subdivision plan and construction document approval process. On Old US 1 and New Hill Olive Chapel and New Hill Holloman Road, the aerial kind of shows this a lot better than the site plan, so I can go back and forth if you'd like. So the applicant originally proposed this, and this was in the PUD text in the staff report, is with sufficient right-of-way along Old US 1 and New Hill Holloman Road, the developer shall construct an eastbound right turn lane with 175 feet of storage and appropriate deceleration, length, and taper. After that was proposed, the applicant and the traffic engineering staff worked out a new condition, and I'll read it to you. It's a little lengthy, so I will try to go slow. The traffic recommended this wording: developer shall construct an eastbound right turn lane with 175 feet of storage and appropriate deceleration, length, and taper, which is similar to what we saw. In the event that there is insufficient right-of-way for this off-site transportation improvement, developers shall use commercially reasonable efforts to acquire the right-of-way through good faith negotiations, starting with an offer to the third-party landowners based upon an appraised value of the right-of-way to be acquired. In the event such negotiations are unsuccessful and the Town of Apex is unable or unwilling to assist the developer in acquiring the requisite right-of-way, developers shall pay a fee in lieu in the amount of the appraised cost of the required right-of-way, plus estimated construction costs of the right turn lane. And the applicant has agreed to this wording, and Russell's here to also explain that.
Lauren, can you just show me on the map where this eastbound lane that you're talking about?
Sure. Russell, would you like to come up here and just to make sure I'm in the right place? You're getting there. Okay. Good. Right. So I want to make sure I.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's the intersection here at New Hill Olive Chapel Road, North-South Road, and East-West Old US 1. It's a right turn lane in the southwest quadrant. So it's coming from the west to turn south to go toward Highway 1, toward the interchange.
Okay.
Thank you, Russell.
So that's quite a ways from that parcel, but I see why. Okay.
Yes, it is an off-site improvement, that's correct.
I'm definitely gonna ask for more information when.
Yes, and we still have 2 more to go, so. And this is in your PUD text in the staff report. The developer shall construct 2 access points on Old US 1, consisting of Site Drive 1, a full movement, stop-controlled, public street intersection, approximately 1,200 feet west of the intersection of New Hill Olive Chapel Road, including an eastbound left turn lane on Old US 1 with 50 feet of storage. Site Drive 2 is a full movement, stop-controlled public street intersection, approximately 1,050 feet west of the intersection of Old US 1 and Site Drive 1, including an eastbound left turn lane on Old US 1 with 50 feet of storage. A letter of impact from Wake County Public School Systems was received for this rezoning and is included in the staff report packet. Wake County Public School Systems indicates that elementary, middle, and high schools within the current assignment area for this rezoning development are anticipated to have insufficient capacity for future students. Transportation to schools outside of the current assignment area should be anticipated. School expansion or construction within the next 5 years may address concerns at the elementary, middle, and high school grade level. The Environmental Advisory Board held a meeting with the applicant on April 21st. The zoning conditions suggested by the EAB are listed on page 7 of the staff report along with the applicant's response to each. The Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources Advisory Commission reviewed the Utley Farms PUD project at their August 31st meeting. The commission made a recommendation for a fee in lieu of land dedication or improvements. Approval of the proposed rezoning is reasonable and in the public interest because it will allow development for single-family residential uses in a manner to be generally consistent with the surrounding properties. The proposed rezoning also provides additional environmental conditions and a minimum of 2 affordable housing units. Planning staff recommends approval of rezoning case 22CZ09 Utley Farms PUD as proposed by the applicant. I'm happy to answer questions as well as Russell and the applicant.
2 affordable housing units?
A minimum. Yes, sir.
Minimum.
That's the way the PUD text is written.
Thank you. Any questions for Lauren?
Lauren, I don't, but Russell, I would love some, I don't think I understand. I appreciate your slow walking through the language. I remember reading it, so I appreciate
And I
your slow
apologize for
walking.
not printing out. We received it a little later in the day.
All good. I was hoping you could just walk through why it was necessary.
So from our perspective, it's not necessary to have all the additional language, but what we ran into is originally my requested condition was the first sentence, and that was it. Developer shall construct an eastbound right turn lane with 175 feet of storage and appropriate deceleration length and taper. So the applicant had a concern with the potential that they might not be able to acquire the right-of-way. So they added to it to say with sufficient right-of-way. The problem with that is it doesn't actually explain the process by which we would normally operate for them to prove that they can't get the right-of-way. So that started the whole discussion about what additional text would need to be added to provide those caveats. So that's essentially what it was. So we worked with legal to come up with they provided some additional text. We modified that. We worked with legal, and that's why it got so complicated. Normally, we wouldn't get into this kind of detail. Normally, we would just go under the assumption that if the developer is unable to acquire the right-of-way, they would show the town they've entered into good faith negotiations. They weren't able to do it. Then the town would make a decision. Town council would make a decision if they want to be involved in that. So in this case, they wanted clarification added into the condition to make sure that they understood that if it can't be obtained, then what happens.
So I feel like, for me, I feel like it almost opened a can of worms. although I appreciate the clarification on both parties and appreciate the transparency because I think it just adds to the process. But then my concern comes to and why I appreciate that you're here to answer this is how often does this happen? But for me the bottom line concern is being obviously understand if they're not able to obtain what that looks like, but the reality is that transportation is a huge issue, and so anything that could potentially a fee in lieu is great. Thankful they're going to still contribute to the town. Grateful that's in writing. But the reality is that we may not have what is recommended. And so then I have concerns about how often does this happen? And then what happens if they're not able to obtain the sufficient amount of right-of-way and we now have a bottleneck that's being created?
Yeah, based on my experience, most of the time we're able to get improvements built either through developer working with private owners to go through those negotiations if right-of-way is not available, or coming back to the town and the town being able to assist in that process because ultimately town council approves these rezonings, and by approving the rezonings they're approving the condition, and the understanding is that it could be an issue coming back. So I think there are some times where, I guess there could be where the town would decide it does not want to get involved or can't get involved for whatever reason, but we don't normally run into that issue.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for staff?
I do have a question. What is the 100% AMI figure currently? Do we know what it is in Wake County or in this MSA?
I am 345, give or take, from what Jeff said. He worked with Mr. CJ.
45,000. The builder did some research on it.
Oh, that's the value. I thought it was like the median income. You're saying the house value, okay, is, okay.
Amanda I would like to defer to see if you are.
I'm sorry, you have to repeat the question. We're answering other questions. over
We're all
here.
thinking we need to get better jobs for a minute.
Yeah.
$345,000. Now, that's the house value. They're looking for what is the median income. Median income.
For
I actually used to
100%?
know this off
100%
the top of my
AMI.
head.
I don't have that information off the top of my head.
Yeah. So,
I don't want to speak incorrectly. I have an idea, but I can look it up.
That's fine. I mean, Mr. Roach gave a value of the house, which kind of, it gives you a good gut check versus what else is getting sold in this area, that's quite affordable, even at 100%.
Yes.
yeah, apologize. I was hoping I had it, but don't have the answer for that.
Are these houses are they on foundation or slabs? The pictures look like they're on slabs.
And I can let,
Help the pricing, I mean.
yeah, and I can also let the applicant speak to this, but
Okay.
with their zoning conditions in the it doesn't specify, so
Yeah.
it would be probably on slabs.
That helps to the pricing.
Mhm.
That affects the pricing a lot.
Yes. And obviously, but they can speak more to that on their floor plan or elevations.
Any other questions for staff? The applicant want to speak?
Mr. Skinner, you knew I'd take advantage of speaking, right?
Yes.
All 9.5 minutes here. Here I go. I'm sorry. Chairman Skinner, Vice Chair Sherman, congratulations, by the way. Members of the Planning Board, Jeff Roach with Peak Engineering and Design. I do have a big speech written out here, but I'm going to actually go to the transportation item real quick because I think there's a little clarification I want to add. Just west of this project is Gracewood subdivision, which is out in this area here. The reason that we asked for this additional condition and worked it out with Russell was because Gracewood is about 450 lots or 425 lots, somewhere in that range. They have committed to a left turn lane at, if you come from Bonsall, US 1 coming up this way heading east, they committed to do a left turn lane already. They are back in at New Hill Olive Chapel Road and Old US 1. What my concern was is that they build the left turn lane ahead of us. There's no way that we can fit the right turn lane inside of the existing right-of-way. So that's why I asked staff for some clarification, because I didn't want to have to come back and rezone the project again to remove a right turn lane condition I know I can't build. We're also in a historic designation area in downtown New Hill, so these property owners are historically designated. The last thing I want to do is go to them and try to get property from them, and they back away and say no, and I'm back in front of council. That's the reason. If Gracewood is not ahead of us, then we will build the right turn lane. It's going to be tight, but I think we have enough right-of-way to do it. So we've committed to do it with staff, and we'll work it out. Okay? So I just want to clarify why we asked for it. It wasn't that we were trying to be sneaky or get away with doing something. If we're first in, we're going to build that right turn lane.
Context helps, yeah.
Yeah. So a little bit of context to the case here for the turn lane stuff.
Yeah, a quick question.
Yes,
So,
sir.
Is there enough room out there between the existing right-of-way and the gas line?
It's really tight. We don't know you can see the markings on it. The first thing we'll do is, once we get through zoning, is go a little bit deeper. We'll do some SUE survey work at that intersection as well as our frontage to identify what utilities are out there and what relocations are required. So it's a good point and something that it's a little early in the stage to do that, but we will find it. I appreciate you pointing that out, though. First of all, I want to thank Lauren for stepping up and making the presentation tonight very thorough. And I also want to introduce Roman Acosta. He's with KB Home here tonight. If you guys have any questions about slab on grade, you know, the structure that they're building, they are also building directly north of this property. They are building here in Belterra, and those houses are all, I think they're probably all sold before they even start foundations. So you see the need for this product and this location. People really want to be here. So it's a great product, great company, and we're really working hard with these guys to set some conditions. With that, Mr. Skinner asked about affordability. We've agreed with CJ there are 2 affordable housing, 100% AMI. So it's a little bit new out in this area. Also want to point out there are 3 solar installations as well in the subdivision. That's something we added after EAB in conversation with staff and the builder. They're doing, I think, 5 inside, or they're doing a couple inside of Belterra, but I forget the exact number. Couple other things. The big one is the historic preservation. If you've driven by there, and I know Mr. Hastings knows the area really well, this is the Nami Horton farm here and the farmhouse. There's a large red barn that you can see from the street, and there's also one of the barns in the back. All 3 of those will be retained. The current goal with SHPO and capital area preservation is to reserve, keep them in place and actually deed off a lot that will be a historically designated lot with the homes and those 3 structures on site. That may change depending on what CAP and SHPO and the builder come up with. They may move them down the street, they may keep them there. We're still working with CAP as to what CAP and SHPO as to what they want to do with it. So a couple things that we typically, a little bit above and beyond with the affordable housing, the solar, and now the historic preservation with some really large trees out in front as well. Roadway improvements, Russell and Lauren went over them. We did the intersection. We have frontage improvements. We're also doing turn lanes across the front to get into the development. And then we also capped the density at 2 units an acre for the almost 57 acres. So it puts it at about 113 max lots for the development. It is a funny shaped piece of property. The Horton piece, which is the large piece in the front, is relatively wide open. It's a large field. It does have an old pond on it, and it does have a creek here. The back piece is eaten up by quite a bit of stream buffer and creeks. The problem is the sewer is to the north in this in the location here on the screen. So it made sense to go ahead and combine the Horton piece and the Wellens piece, which is that northern kind of looks like Oklahoma shaped, to get to the sewer. We set it aside as future development, and working with Lauren and staff, we kind of set it aside because we don't know what to do with it yet. And then last minute, we came back with the idea of why don't we just eliminate the buffer if the Miller piece, the VTech piece, and the other pieces in here ever decide to redevelop, then it becomes one larger single-family residential development. We set it up with multiple points of access. As you can see here through the arrows, we've got an existing stub street coming out of Belterra that will get extended, a stub street here at Turner Pines that will be extended, and we've done kind of mirrored it on the Horton Park to the south. So you can see we've set up for future redevelopment when and if this ever decides that it's ready to change. We are following the 2045 land use plan with a low-density residential below 3 units an acre. We're following transportation plan, parks and recreation with about almost $500,000 parks and recreation fee, historic preservation, which we went over. Staff's been great to work with. I think the conditions that we built into this will bring another residential project in this area that we'll all be happy to say, hey, I worked out here, I live out here, I built this site. So with that, I'm looking for your support tonight, and I'm here to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Roach?
I got a question. What is the ultimate street section for old Highway 1 frontage?
I'm going to lean on Sarah behind you a little bit. I think it's 110-foot right-of-way. It's either a 4-lane median divided or like a 5-lane, 2 each direction with a center turn lane, something along those lines. Is that right?
It is an ultimate 110-foot right-of-way.
Okay.
And is this one of those old tracks that it's to the center line, you have to dedicate, 55 feet?
Correct. We're dedicating 30 feet that's underlies the existing road, and another, I think, 25-foot right-of-way dedication on top of that. So yeah, 55 feet.
Additional questions for the applicant? All right, thank you, Mr. Roach.
Thank you, guys.
Did we have any people sign in for this particular item?
Just Jeff Roach,
All right, so I'll open up the public comment section, but I'm not sure if anyone's here to speak on it. Do we have anyone to speak on this item? No? All right, well then I'll close the public comment section and bring it back to the board for discussion and a possible motion.
I'll go first. I don't have any problems with this one. I like the 2 houses at 100% AMI. Getting $500,000 Parks and Rec fee will do a lot of good for all of Apex. And this feels a little bit like an infill subdivision since it's surrounded by much of the same. I do like the right-of-way dedication along that frontage of Highway 1. I do wish, and I'm not going to make a grandstand tonight on this case because it's only, 2 lots or half-acre lots average, but every other jurisdiction in the triangle, you build half your road. So in this case, the applicant would be building 2 paved lanes and half of a median. So when all these developments happen, you daisy chain it, you have your full improvement. I know Tina brought it up, we have transportation issues, right? That's the way you solve it. Town of Cary's been doing it for decades, and they have streets built. So we haven't been doing it in Apex. We've been doing fee and lieu, and you build, turn lanes, but you do dedicate the right of way. I'm glad to see at least we're getting the right of way. But for those reasons, and the storm drain, we didn't talk about it, but they're doing 25-year detention, going above and beyond. I think. Oh, and the historic house. I think. Preserving, what few historic houses are remaining in this part of Apex is pretty cool. So I'm in full support, and I'd make a motion to approve 22 CZ09 as presented by staff.
So a motion by Ryan, do I have a second?
I'll second, and I think the only thing I would add is I'm excited to see some planning for future developments to sort of to add into the infill. I'm excited to see just the thought and the planning to what could come next. So I will second it for that reason.
All right, I got a motion and a second to, I guess next is all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposing? All right, this one passes unanimously. Thank you. That moves us on to item number 4. Sarah is going to talk to us about a possible motion regarding 22 CZ 13-2021, the North Salem Street PUD. All right.
All right. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board.
Good evening.
This will be our last public hearing of the evening, and this is rezoning case 22CZ13 for 2021 North Salem Street PUD. Just to orient you with the general vicinity here, we're looking up in the northeast portion of Apex. So we're north of 64. All right, zoom you guys in a little bit here. We are looking at a 6-acre site located right here. So it is southeast of Salem Woods. As I mentioned here, it's north of 64 and then sits on the northwest side of North Salem Street. The property is currently zoned residential agricultural. And as you can see here, that is some of the surrounding zoning here. The proposed zoning is planned unit development conditional zoning. The 2045 land use map has a recommendation of medium density residential. The proposed rezoning to planned unit development conditional zoning is consistent with that land use map designation, as the proposed rezoning includes a maximum of 40 dwelling units and a maximum density of 6.7 units per acre. The subject property, as I said, is located on North Salem Street, east of Greenlee Drive. There are several existing structures on the property, some of which are historic. So these are the existing structures on site. Based on the report from Capital Area Preservation, the house and 2 outbuildings should be preserved on site or relocated to an appropriate location. CAP states that 90% of the original historic fabric remains intact for the 1941 period cottage, a Tudor revival style building that is unique in Apex. Despite vandalism, the structure remains intact and can be relocated or reused. The two outbuildings are identified as the frame wash/guest house and a tobacco curing barn. We will go into the cultural resources cap evaluation a little bit later in the presentation. So we'll circle back. The applicant conducted neighborhood meetings on April 19th and June 8th, 2022. Those meeting reports are attached. A letter of impact from Wake County Public School System was received for the rezoning. The full report is in your packet. Wake County Public School System indicated that high schools within the current assignment area are anticipated to have insufficient capacity for future students, and school expansion or construction within the next 5 years may address concerns at the high school level. So get you here a little bit to the site layout. We'll go over all of the details. So obviously here we have our perimeter buffer. We'll get into this a little bit more, but this is our thoroughfare buffer, as Salem Street is one of our thoroughfares, and we have a 20-foot type B perimeter buffer for the remaining area. We have a proposed access point for connectivity, and then we have a full movement access here. So permitted uses include accessory apartment, townhouse, park active and passive, and utility minor. The overall development shall not exceed 40 dwelling units. The minimum lot width is 20 feet in the current PUD text. A maximum building height shall be 42 feet, maximum of 2 stories. The full listing of setbacks are in your staff report and are consistent with what we see for townhome uses. Buffers, again, that table is on page 3 of your staff report. The applicant is meeting all of the UDO required buffers. We do have a note for the proposed buffer along North Salem Street, and that is that an encroachment into the buffer may be required for a Town of Apex bus stop. If an encroachment is required, the encroachment into the buffer shall continue to be counted as a buffer and RCA for purposes of meeting the UDO and conditional zoning. RCA is, the applicant is proposing to dedicate a minimum of 20%, consistent with section 8.12 of the UDO. Parking is consistent with section 8.3. Signage consistent with section 8.7, with a note that any of the Environmental Advisory Board recommendations for signage shall be installed in locations that are publicly accessible, such as adjacent to but outside of public property and or public easements, amenity centers, sidewalks, greenways, or side paths. Architectural standards, oops, come back to that one. Here is illustrative elevations for you. We do have a listing of the proposed architectural zoning condition standards, and those are on page 3 and 4 of your staff report. Now we will get to go back to this one here. As I mentioned, get back to the cultural resources component. According to North Carolina Historic Preservation Office records, the subject site does contain historic structures. Capital Area Preservation has evaluated the site and determined that the 3 historic structures should be preserved on site or relocated and preserved in another location within Apex's planning jurisdiction. These structures are the 1941 period cottage, the frame wash guest house, and a tobacco curing barn. And we received an email today from Capital Area Preservation. They weren't able to attend the meeting tonight, but I will go ahead and read that information to you. And it is as follows. So, the issue of integrity in respect to the interior is something new and has it has come out of nowhere. It was not brought up once in the past 7 months since our initial review and numerous subsequent discussions with the developer. Our 90% figure is based on the fact that 90% of original fabric remains. Most everything was intact, and we made it known during the initial evaluation. Moisture mitigation is a part of restoration, but that does not render the historic materials a loss. Everything we stated continues to be true, and drywall is usually something that always has to be replaced. The full report, original report from CAP is included in your staff report, and there was some question as to where this 90% comes from. And this is why we have CAP, because I am not a historic preservationist. And the house mover's opinion revolves around liability for materials, so that he is not responsible for materials damaged during the move that he believes are vulnerable when moving, i.e. drywall. Over the past 7 months, the developer has repeatedly expressed concerns about structural integrity with respect to moving the house. First, there was the concern of if it could even be moved, with potential settling and cracks in respect to the house's structural integrity. Once a letter from a house mover confirmed that it could be moved, the concerns then shifted to having to move the structure and pay for the move and find a new suitable location for the house. The move has been the only significant issue brought forward in these past 7 months, never an issue of the interior's integrity as now suggested. In the end, the situation is very much like the Phillips house with Staley Smith and the Crossroads dealership. Both houses have basements and the same level of integrity, and the only difference is that the Phillips house had a new lot nearby which it could be moved. If they were to provide a report from another qualified historic preservation expert, one that also meets the Secretary of Interior's professional qualification standards, to provide a second opinion that states otherwise, then they should try to do so. If the same logic were applied to every other house saved in Apex under the Apex UDO, then all interiors would have been gutted. But that has never been needed in many of these other houses that were neglected. There are several houses listed: Tom Olive House, Mills House, Phillips, Upchurch Williams House. We have seen other houses in far worse shape that were restored under a rehab agreement and easement, and all original architectural elements were repaired and nothing needed to be gutted as suggested by the house mover here. That is from Jeremy Bradham with Capital Area Preservation. And now I will move to public facilities. And there's our utility map. Sewer is available at an outfall at the tributary of the Williams Creek outfall that runs through the town of Apex right-of-way on North Salem Street. The nearest pump station is located approximately a half-mile away at Apex Community Park, and a capacity study shall be provided during construction drawing submittal, and that is included in the PUD text. Extension of water shall be provided via a 12-inch water line on North Salem Street, and electric services will be extended to the site, and natural gas should it be available. Stormwater management is consistent with the UDO requirements. The applicant is, back to that one, has included an affordable housing component, and that is of the 40 permitted townhouse dwellings is 1 unit at 100% AMI for 10 years. All of the detailed language is included on pages 4 and 5 of your staff report. The proposed pod is consistent with the Apex Transportation Plan and all of our standard specs and details. Development frontage along North Salem Street is constructed based on a minimum 41-foot back-to-back curb and gutter 3-lane thoroughfare. Minimum 80-foot right-of-way. That means 40 feet of right-of-way will be dedicated from center line, along with a 5-foot sidewalk along Salem Street. A maximum of 1 access point shall be proposed. There's the mass, there it is. And to be located a minimum of 500 feet east of Greenlee Drive, which if we go back is over here-ish. And that is also subject to Apex and DOT approval. A center left turn lane shall be extended along the property frontage between Greenlee Drive and the Economy Exterminators, which is located on the south side of Salem Street. Again, this will be subject to Apex and DOT approval, review and approval. Minimum 5-foot sidewalk along the frontage and along both sides of all internal streets, including cul-de-sacs. The proposed site exists along though not within the transit-oriented development context area, as outlined in the Advanced Apex 2045 Transportation Plan. Additionally, the proposed site is along the, your staff report does say future Apex Cary Express bus and commuter rail lines, and that the nearest transit stop for the local Go Apex route is proposed to be at the intersection of North Salem Street and the Peakway, and just want to update that that bus stop, or that route rather, is in existence, and that transit stop is already there at Salem Street and the Peakway. A bus stop subject to review and approval by the town of Apex and DOT will also be located along the frontage of the PUD to accommodate a future stop for the Apex Cary Express route. The applicant met with the Environmental Advisory Board in April 21st of this year. The zoning conditions suggested by the EAB are located on page 5 and 6 of your staff report, and the applicant has provided, committed to 6 out of the, I think it's about 13 conditions, and those are listed there, 1 through 6, on page 6 of your application. They do include signage at the SCMs, and that includes their location. As I mentioned prior, the minimum of 75% of the landscaping shall be native species. A minimum of 4 native hardwood tree species shall be used, and all homes shall be pre-configured with conduit for solar energy. The applicant reviewed this project at their February 23rd, 2022 meeting and recommended fee in lieu. Planning staff recommends approval of rezoning 22 CZ 13-2021 North Salem Street PUD with the conditions as offered by the applicant. The 2045 land use map designates the site as medium density residential. The proposed PUD is consistent with that land use classification. The proposed rezoning allows for a maximum of 6.7 dwelling units per acre, which contributes to an overall density that supports future transit within the TOD context area as adopted with Advanced Apex. The proposed rezoning is reasonable and in the public interest because it encourages compact infill development, serves future transit with the provision of a bus stop on North Salem Street, and provides 1 affordable housing unit. I will be happy to entertain any questions. I know the applicant is here to address questions as well, and I believe may have some potential updates for y'all to consider. Thank you.
Any questions for Sarah? Sarah, I do have one question.
Sure.
You mentioned a right turn lane to get into the property coming, I guess that's westbound, is that right?
It is a center left turn lane shall be extended along the property frontage. So it would be the turn lane coming from here to here. Let me see if I can take us back to the aerial and get a little better look. So it is a center left turn lane along the frontage property. So between here to about, I think it's about, okay, thanks.
Isn't there a crest in the road about there, from what I recall? It's kind of like a blind spot as you come over.
That hill's a little further to the north and east.
Is it?
We drive that
Okay.
every day.
All right, I noticed, I know the area as well, so that's why I was trying to think of where that crest was.
Yeah, we do have a condition for the intersection spacing, but as usual, it's subject to our review at the time of site plan. We'll make sure that there isn't a site distance issue. We'll look at the vertical crest issue. Yeah, and the turn lane is actually matching up. There's some existing widening out there already, and there's a turn lane, so it's just continuing that, matching up that 3-lane section, so it's contiguous through that area.
Okay, good deal, thank you. Any questions for staff? Did the applicant want to speak?
Good evening, Chairman Skinner and members of the Planning Board. My name is Brendy Vega. I'm with Withers Ravenel at 115 McKeenan Drive, Cary. And I don't want to add too much to what Sarah already mentioned here. You know, we have put them through a lot of meetings, a lot of questions, so thank you, staff. And I did just want to mention the email that was received from Jeremy Bradham earlier. We were questioning how did he come to this 90% of the structure's integrity. And for him to say that it is coming out of left field, we submitted, this actually didn't make it into the package, but the pictures that were attached are from J.S. Thompson Engineering. And in that letter that we submitted about the structure, it does say that based on the condition of the structure at the time of this inspection and serious lack of maintenance on the home, it is highly likely that in addition to the damage and issues noted, there may be significant moisture damage to the structure in the walls and subflooring that is not visible, as well as mold and mildew present from prolonged water intrusion. It is my opinion that without the unknowns of moisture damage, mold, etc., in the walls and other areas, I would not think it would be economically sensible for anyone to try to save or move the structure. And because, you know, the letter wasn't saying that it couldn't be moved, just that it's not economically feasible, we had a meeting with Capital Area Preservation and staff, and they recommended that we contact one of the house movers to see what they thought about being able to move the structure. And the letter that is in your packet is from Wolf Movers. And they also noted in there, would recommend experts in moisture examine the home. Probably all interior will need to be replaced. Would recommend checking for termites and powder post beetles. So it's not something new. You know, this letter's back from May, and this one is August. And so Mr. Bowles with Baker Residential has contacted another expert to come in and look at the house to definitively say if there's a lot of mold and mildew, what does that mean for the structure? Is all we're saving is the brickwork on the exterior of the home. I did bring photos of the site if anyone wants to see them, but unless you have any questions for us.
Are the photos you have separate from the ones that are in the packet?
Yeah. We're happy to answer any questions you have.
Any questions for the applicant?
The brick home is the one we're discussing.
Yes.
Yep.
Wow. Okay.
I have a question regarding the, in the staff report, there were a couple of items from the Environmental Advisory Board.
Yes.
Are there any updates to that list that was added?
Yes, we are looking at adding, installing pervious surface and pavements where practicable if it does exceed parking maximums, which we don't think we would exceed those. We are willing to add 2 signs marking the RCA area so that people do not enter that RCA area. And for the existing trees greater than 12-inch in diameter that are removed on the site, replanting those at a 1.5-inch caliper rate. Due to the amount of trees, we don't believe that solar may work on this site, but we are pre-wiring all the homes for solar. And we are willing to do the non-residential common area, indoor dark sky association compliance standards, which would be those three under that. So
Randy, I do have a question for you. I noticed on the RCA plan for the PUD site plan that on the southwest corner, that it's cornered off. It happens, yeah, there's a green corner just below the SCM. It just so happens there's a 53-inch oak tree. Is the intent to save that oak tree?
the intent is to save the oak tree.
Nice.
So Ed's gonna do his best not to grade into it, so once we get field topography, that is the intent, and that's why that area has been cornered off.
So there are still concerns with Campo, is
Yeah,
that
so
right?
if I may ask, so are you trying to present tonight by removing the condition of saving the house?
No, we're trying to determine if the house can be saved, so.
So, I guess, how are you asking for us to vote tonight then? Because according to the first paragraph in the packet, one of the conditions is that you save the house and the structures as identified by CAP. But it sounds like you're trying to walk back a little bit on that condition. And I'm not sure, considering capillary preservation is the leading authority for Apex, Cary, Holly Springs, Wake County. They've got an objective point of view, so it's not like they're on either side. And are we trying to bring in an expert to confuse the issue, or, you know, because like the Phillips house that they're referencing where Crossroads Ford is, had a basement just like this, and I stood in about 1.5 feet of water, and nobody lived in that house 25 years, I'll say. But it was moved, and Staley Smith has it now. And so I just don't see the correlation between seeing what I see in the pictures and the damage to the point that, you know, I think if a house older than 40 years and Apex doesn't have powder post beetles, then that's amazing.
The intent is not to walk away from the ordinance, the way it's written. The intent is to find out if we can save it. So the mover has said they can move it, and we've explored moving it into this RCA area here, which would give it its own area, a lot. However, the preservation easement and preservation, the agreement to preserve the home has to be signed by the first plat. If we are unable to find someone to take this home, and CAP has told us that sometimes it takes 3 years, and to have it preserved into a preservation agreement by the first plat, due to the condition and not knowing who is willing to put that much money into a home.
So I will, again, I feel like the question is asked. I hear that you're not trying to walk back, but I also hear an attempt to walk back. So I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, well, we're not preservationists either, so we're trying to.
I'm not a preservationist either, so
We're trying to understand the full magnitude.
So does it sound like there needs to be a continuance until there is an understanding? Because CAP is telling us one thing, and we're gonna go by, I am going to go by what CAP says. So if there isn't a disagreement, I'm wondering if there does need to be an entire step back to ensure that we are all in agreement.
There is a court order that this property is sold, so we request respectfully request that you not continue it. There is a judgment, it's in the packet, saying this house must be sold, or this property must be sold. There's no mention of the house.
Okay, so I'm gonna, again, come back to the
I
original
have
question.
Mr. Bowles speak.
Thank you.
Let me ask her one question, quick question.
While they're conferring, Jeff, you're the member up here that would probably know most about this type of situation. What is your opinion on this house?
100% savable.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I moved a house, the original Jones Franklin house, built in 1822, sat in front of the town of Cary. There were 3 town council members at Cary that wanted to tear the house down because they thought that the pine trees were holding it up. I got together with the developer. It's now sitting at my farm. So, it was built in 1822.
Wow.
We had to take the roof off to move it. But everything's savable.
Can I speak this? I'm Mark Bowles with Baker Residential, 7001 Weston Parkway, Cary. Yeah, I think, and that's what we found out, everything is savable, but at what cost? The biggest issue here is at the maximum of 40 units, a 6-acre site. It's putting a pretty substantial, financial burden on the property. And we are very willing to craft a way to, contribute to the historic preservation and the nature of it. But we're not sure complying with the ordinance as written is economically viable. So I don't know if that means consider it with a waiver of that condition. We would still continue working with it, or working at some alternatives. Like I said, we're still trying to get people to give us advice on it. And there is a space in the RCA area that could be moved, but then there's that requirement. You would be more of an expert, but pretty much the whole interior would have to be redone. I guess it may be able to save mantles and some of the pieces, but I'm guessing just we don't do historic preservation, but it's probably $200,000 to $300,000 of work. The estimate we got for moving the house is $100,000 just to get it up on the pallet. The $100,000 would essentially move it on site if it had to get on the road and start moving power poles or moving the power lines. It would start going up from there. So our problem is it's kind of an unknown blank check at this time, and committing to the ordinance as written.
So respectfully, Mr. Bowles, I'm going to come back to Mr. Hastings' question. It doesn't sound like you're ready to be here. It sounds like, right? Because, again, I am going to take the capital areas assessment, and that is that the property is salvageable. Thank you, Mr. Hastings. The property is salvageable. And so I understand that the economic cost may not be worth it to you. And I completely understand that you've got to balance the, dollars. And so I completely understand it, but that the matter before us is that this property is salvageable. And so if that is not, if that is not a cost that you're willing to take on, then I think it comes back to you. This is before us, and this is what capital area recommends. And shy of it being any different, there would be no reason. And right now, that is what it is. So it sounds like if you need some additional information that you're trying to gather, it sounds like this is not the right place for you. But please correct me if I'm wrong. I understand there's a court injunction, but that has nothing to do with the UDO and where we are and the matter before us. It would be to approve this as presented. I would not be in favor of any waivers. That does not mean my fellow board members would not. I would not be in favor of any any waivers. And so are you willing to accept that? And if not, that's another discussion, clearly.
And I'll throw in a little bit. $100,000 to get it up and moving on the property is $2,500 per unit. And the estimate I saw in here was how much per unit that you're selling? You think that this townhomes will sell for how much?
upper 300s to 400s.
So what it sounds like is it's coming down to the economics of, is it affordable to move? And at 40 townhomes of 300.
And a small site is not, I know some of the examples that CAP has given us are for 50, 60 acre sites where it's easy to move it to a new location on property.
Or we move the Williams Up
Or leave
Church
it.
House across 540 on Roberts Road. So we took a 6,000 square foot house, moved it across, and now it's a wedding venue. So it's not, I'm not saying it's easy,
Yeah.
but
It's
if
movable.
it was easy, anybody would do it.
That
And I'd love to be able to help any way I can. But when I hear things like, to Ms. Sherman's point, that we're having to rush this because there's a court order to sell the property, I understand that, but to some degree that's irrelevant to what we're hearing today.
Okay. Can you give us a minute to discuss it, please?
That's up to the chairman.
Sorry, if
Sure.
that's-
I'll say yes,
Chairman.
if it's-
Thank you.
Please.
Jeff, those houses you were mentioning that are moved, what were the examples that were given?
We moved the Williams Oak Church House. It was sitting on the Cary side of.
Up there off
540.
Roberts Road?
Yep.
It was like like kind of 2 or 3 story wood balloon frame?
And that landowner donated that 5 acres and the house, so that made a
Right.
big difference. They didn't have to buy any land.
And again, I'm
made a
trying
huge
not to get too wrapped around the axle, and I do not want to dismiss what CAPS is doing, but I'm looking at these pictures, and I live in a 1970s house, and I'm looking at this thinking my house is up for CAPS to look at, being like, hey, you got a split level ranch, you got something special. I don't think it is.
Yeah.
I look at this and I'm having similar reactions.
But
it's not the named house that you
But
guys.
to me, this is the antithesis of what we just heard from the previous public hearing.
Right.
They figured out a way to save a house.
Right.
And the beauty is not necessarily in the eye of the beholder.
Sure.
It's in the eye of capital area preservation. And they deem this style of house somewhat rare and worth saving. I mean, I live in a 1920s house that I'm trying to get them to deem salvageable. And there's plenty of, the inventory on those houses are a lot, so they're not, well, it doesn't mean I'm gonna sell it, but.
Mr. Chairman, we'll request to defer. Yes.
All right. So how do we move forward then? Oh, it sounds like we're withdrawing.
Is that a request for a continuance?
Yes.
Continuance.
Continuance.
All right.
Is there a date certain?
Next month, yes.
So that'd be November 14th.
So as far as the possible motion, there is none. We're going to continue this for a month.
You need to have a motion, a second vote on the continuance, so we
All
don't
right.
have to re-advertise it.
All right. So for rezoning case 22 CZ 13-2021, I need a possible motion and a second.
I'll
for
make a motion to
continuance.
continue to the next meeting, is what it sounds like, in November.
So I got a motion from Tim. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Tina will second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposing? All right, so 22 CZ 13-2021 will be continued until the November planning board meeting.
Thank you.
All right, and I guess that closes out the public comment sections. And if I understand right, we have no new business. So I need one final motion to adjourn by Tim. Do I have a second?
Second.
Tina, second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposing? All right, then this meeting is closed.
I'm just